We're going to continue in our Way of the Wise series. We will actually be selling this shirt, not the Way of the Wise series, but what I'm about to say, because it is what Jesus says. Give honor where honor is due. And if you would you thank Joe for helping lead us and just celebrating God's presence? All right. And so, but as we prepare for Beach Week, the Way of the Wise will influence a lot of that as well. Everybody thank Dan, too, for his strong muscles and how much of a man he is. Exactly. Indeed. Joe, that was a little too loud. But anyway, all right. So tonight, I've got a question for you. I've got several questions for you. And these questions have answers, so this isn't like sometimes when you're in a school class and they ask a question, you're like, am I supposed to answer that? Or is that just supposed to make me feel dumb? You ever been in one of those classes and you're like, okay, I just feel dumb. All right, but anyway, all right. But how many of you have a neighbor that you like genuinely love? Like they are an awesome neighbor. You love to see them. Yeah. So it's like somebody in your neighborhood, like a neighbor, you love to see them. How many of you, one of your neighbors is actually your best friend, has been your best friend for a long time? Yeah, there it is. That's awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing. I had one of those. Kai was one of those neighbors to me. All right. Those are the neighbors you love to see, you love to hang out with. Heather and Aaron, they were our next door neighbors when I was growing up. And Heather and Aaron, I loved to see them. It's a little bit of a different day. I wish we still had this day. But my parents were like, they loved that we hung out and just went on all these adventures together. And they trusted our neighbors. The neighbors trusted us. We would sit out in each other's driveways until literally like, maybe my parents were terrible parents. I don't know. Like midnight or 1 o'clock playing like Monopoly and Connect Four, like laughing about dumb stories that were totally and genuinely dumb. But you know what I'm talking about. If you have a deep, awesome friend, and you're like, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, we're still talking about unicorns and whatever, right? And you're like, we are, and we're not stopping. We're going harder, right? So you got those. Those are good neighbors, right? As I said, Kai up the street was a super awesome neighbor. Right now, we've got a neighbor across the street. His name is Walter, and my kids love to look out the window and see Walter. He's the nicest dude. He's so helpful. He's so kind. Michael crosses. But these are neighbors that I love. Like, Michael watches out for our house. We watch out for his house, sometimes creepily so. We're like, hey, Michael, I can see your lights on. He's like, stop it. You're creepy. All right? And he's like, just making sure you're safe. All right. But anyway, he's like, stop it. You don't need it. All right. So we just watch each other's security lights. And so we're like, hey, do you have an intruder? He's like, no, my cat just turned the light on again. All right. And I'm like, well, get rid of that cat. But anyway, all right. But how many of you got a neighbor that's the worst? Anybody? Oh, okay. Your hands went up a little faster for that one. You're like, the worst. All right, exactly. So you got a neighbor that's the worst, all right? I don't know. When I was growing up as a kid, I kind of felt like we had neighbors that were great. You had Casey across the street. I'm trying to think of like even my brother's friends and sister's friends. We had a long list of neighbors that are like the worst. Now, this dude used to live direct across the street. His name was Brett. And Brett, to be honest, maybe we were the worst neighbor for Brett, because Brett would get stung by every insect that could sting you, like all the time. So like if we were on a swing set and there was like a wasp nest, you ever had that? Like after the winter, you get on the swing set and you're like, yay! And you just stirred up a wasp's home and they're like, no, you get to die today, right? And they all come out and they're chasing you everywhere. That would happen, but Brett would be the one. He was like the sting magnet. Brett would be the one. They would all fly out and just gun for Brett, like every one of them. We'd be standing there like, why didn't we get stung at all? And Brett's like, I'm going into shock, all right? Like he's like, I got stung 37 times. I was like, I know, it's weird, dude. You have, like, all the time. Like one time in a bush, like we're hiding in a bush playing, like trying to freak out his brother, and a wasp comes, and I just hear a scream from the other bush. I hear like, ah, all right? And I just darted out of my bush. I'm like, I'm out. And I just run, and he's in there getting stung by whatever wasp, all right? We had a bush. We had a swing set. We had underneath his brick wall. We had inside his house. He got stung in his own dang house, like inside the house, not outside the house. He's like, how'd a wasp get in here? I was like, I swear they follow you, Brett, all right? And Brett, all right, so maybe we were the worst, all right? Maybe we were just like, all right, I hope they sting you. And as soon as they do, I'm out. Like we would just jet. I had another neighbor, all right, that kind of the worst, right? He would come over all the time. He set our side yard on fire. Like, you know how Texas is, right? Sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't rain forever, like until the next year, right? And that was one of those years, and he comes over, and literally I look out my window, and it's flames, like going all the way up my window. And I was like, those flames are too big, all right, as if there's like a level of flame that I'm okay with. But anyway, all right, but the flames are, and I look out, and all I see is Nick, and his foot is going over the fence, and I'm like, I know that's Nick. And he just ran home. He set our side yard on fire and ran home. And I was like, Mom, Nick set our yard on fire. We had to go and like dumping water over the fence, all this stuff. And then we had this one neighbor, and I call him the no-name neighbor because I cannot for the life of me remember their names. They were not there long. They lived in the same house that Heather and Aaron lived in after Heather and Aaron moved. But these people, you ever have one of your neighbors that always wants something from you? And it can be anything. I'm talking about anything. They're like, dude, do you like those shorts still? Like the shorts that I'm wearing? Yeah, you like those? When you don't want those anymore, could I have those? And you're like, why do you always want to have whatever I have? Like, why? I mean, you got those friends, you're like, you like those sunglasses? Like everything. It's like, you like this grass in your yard? The grass in my yard? Yeah. Are you using this grass anymore? Could I cut out this and take it to my yard? You're like, stop. Right? These were these people. They'd be like, dude, they would come to the door, knock on the door, not ask for any of us, and just go, do you have Kool-Aid? That was their welcome, their hello. Do you have Kool-Aid? I mean, yeah. Can I have some? It's like, good morning, dude. All right, no, not that. Good. Do you have Kool-Aid? I was like, so now here's where it gets weird. All right, you got a neighbor. This is the worst. Eventually, their parents had like everything. All right. So their parents had the nicest cars, BMWs and Mercedes and Porsches and all that. And they would like come, and we did not live in this super, like, I did not live in this nice, super awesome, amazing neighborhood. There was a super awesome, amazing neighborhood across the street from us, but we knew we don't belong there. But anyway, all right. So they would come here and do all this stuff. The newest gaming system, like you name it, like new, like weird, like things in their house. They would have like lighting arrangements and stuff. There's like, man, your house is like a castle on the inside, but on the outside, it's a house like my house. All right, they did. And then we started figuring out, then they started putting paper on all their windows. Like all of them. Front window, garage windows, side windows, paper on all the windows. And I was like, this is weird. Like they come home with all this. And I figured out the reason their kids wanted something from us all the time is their parents literally stole everything. All those cars, all those lighting like fixtures, all that stuff was just like 100% stolen. And I didn't find that out by accident. All right, I come home one day, and they're in their front yard, and all of their stuff is piled in a big pile. And the police are standing there, and they're saying, you cannot help them move their stuff in. They cannot live in this house anymore. They haven't made any payment, and all of their stuff is being repoed and taken back from all the places they stole it from. And I was like, do you have some Kool-Aid? But anyway, all right. But they're like, what? And say, no. But it was like I was like, oh, what in the world? All right, so that was it. One time, true story, it was freezing cold because, Texas is that way too. Like it's 1,000 degrees, and then suddenly, like today, it's going to be 4 degrees, and you're not prepared for it, and you might die. And you're like, what? All right, and it was one of those super cold days. They hadn't paid for their heat. And we hear this like kink, 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 kink sound on the outside of our house. And my dad's like, what is that sound? And he's like trying to find the sound. And he's like, what is that sound? They were trying to chisel into our gas line. This is genius. Into the gas line that goes into the side of our house to hopefully put a pipe on it so they could get gas to their house to heat their home. This is not a lie. And I was like, they're doing what? And I was like, if you hammer on a gas line that's in a metal pipe and then it lights doesn't that mean both our houses blow up? And I was like, all right. And then he's like, do you have some Kool-Aid? But anyway, all right, so sorry. But it's like the worst neighbors, right? And he probably literally did ask for Kool-Aid in the middle of that. It's like, I know my dad's trying to steal your gas, but do you still have Kool-Aid? No. When we think about a neighbor, and Jesus asks this question, you'll see it on the screen up there in a second, and it's, who is my neighbor? Jesus asked this question, who is my neighbor? And it's right in the middle of that story that Jackson introduced you to. And you've probably heard this story. And my prayer tonight is that you hear this story in a different way. But as in Luke chapter 10, Jesus is telling a story. Now, Jesus has just come off this wild moment. We actually have a moment before this that is really cool because we don't have a lot of these, and I don't know, I think we don't have a lot of these because Jesus wants us to look deep into the little windows we have. We have a celebration moment where Jesus has this like almost like wild, like little kid celebration right before he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And he's excited because he sent out the 72. These are people that followed him and trusted him and were walking after him, said, Jesus, you are the greatest. We trust you. And he sends them out to go and walk in the power of Jesus and do the things that Jesus had been doing, like a supernatural, wild healing, casting out demons, all these crazy things. And he was like, you're going to go do this. And they're like, we're going to what? I'm the same guy you talked to yesterday. I can't do that, right? And he's like, oh, but you can because I'm giving you this power and authority. So they go out and they dare to believe Jesus. And they go out and they do these things, and then they come back, and the people, those disciples are amazed. And those disciples come back, and they're like, you're not going to believe this, Jesus. Even the demons are subject to your name. And Jesus said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I've given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing is going to hurt you. It's this awesome, wild moment. Right before this, Jesus has this celebration between God the Father and Jesus. He's like, this is amazing. Like, what is happening right now as they carry out the power of God, as they cast out demons, they heal people, as they carry my name as far as they can go. This is wild, and he's so excited. But he goes, I don't want you to be most excited about the fact that you have power over the enemy. Don't just rejoice in this. Don't rejoice that even the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice in the most wild way that your names are written in heaven. That's what comes before he tells this story. And then the Bible says, behold. When the Bible says behold, it literally is like him going, no, now look at this. Look what's about to happen. Listen to this right here. So there's a lawyer, and this lawyer stands up, and this is where we come to the place where he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And the lawyer stands up and is trying to test Jesus, and he says, I'm just going to go ahead and read it. I want you to lean in because he says, and behold, look what's happening here. And the lawyer says, teacher, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? Translation, what do I need to do to make sure my name is written in heaven? Because you just told them to celebrate and go wild over the fact their name's written in heaven. What do I need to do to get that to happen to me? And Jesus says, well, what's written in the law? How do you read it? And the lawyer answered, well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. This was like the right answer. This is the kid that raised his hand in class, and he's got the right answer to the last, punctuation. He got it right. He said to him, you have answered correctly. Jesus gave him the check mark. You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. But the lawyer, desiring to, and these two massive words in here, right? Desiring to justify himself, said back to Jesus, well, who's my neighbor? So the question comes first from this man. Okay, well, you tell me who my neighbor is. And this is when Jesus tells a story. Well, okay. Let me tell you a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and on that road, he got caught by some robbers. And these robbers stripped him. They tore all his clothes off him. They beat him up, and then they just left him there, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest, one that stands on our behalf or on people's behalf before God, a priest was going down that road, and he saw this man half dead, and he went to the other side of the road and passed by. So likewise, a Levite, one that is set apart for the service of the Lord, that literally, like when people gave their tithe and their money, it went to support the Levites because they carried on the work of the Lord. When he came to the place and he saw this man half dead, he went on purpose to the other side of the road as well. But a Samaritan. Now, a Samaritan was a person. You may know this. You may have heard this. It is a huge grace that you have heard it, but a Samaritan is the very actual same today in history, right this moment in 2023 as it was back then. Now they're called, they might be called Palestinians. To this day, there are massive news stories about they don't deserve their own land. We don't need to talk about them. We don't need to give them their territory. They are people you don't want to mess with. Those are Samaritans. And the Samaritans were people that the Jewish people specifically did not interact with, did not even recognize, did not walk with. The things that they did in their culture, the way they lived their life was not the way that you as a Jew, as a follower of God, you should ever live. You don't hang out with Samaritans. You don't even go where they go. You don't go where they live. You do not interact with them. And it is one of these Samaritans viewed by the Jewish and Hebrew people as an enemy. A Samaritan comes to where he was, and when he sees him, it says he immediately had compassion. And he didn't just have compassion because that would be nice. He went up to him and he intentionally bound up his wounds. He took his own oil and wine and he poured it on this man to clean the wounds and to dress the wounds. Then he set this man on his own animal and he brought him to an inn, a place he could stay, and he took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, the money that he had at that moment, and he gave them to the innkeeper. He says, I want you to take care of this man, and if you have to spend more, I will come back and I'll pay you back. He left it wide open. He didn't say how long. He didn't say when the innkeeper should stop. He said, take care of him. And all you've got to spend more, I'll come back and I'll give that to you, no matter what it costs me. And that's when Jesus says, which of these do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who got beat up, stripped, and left for dead by the robbers? And the lawyer answered, well, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, well, go and do that. Now, when I was your age, to be honest, and I heard that story, it's a pretty story. I actually like to hear the story. It's a good story, right? Like, wow, that man had compassion on this other man. We need to have compassion like that man, right? Absolutely. That is an incredible gem and a diamond to take away from that. Yes, go have mercy. Go walk in compassion. Go do that. But I want to bring you back to the question that the man asked first. Who is your neighbor? I have... when I think for the first time heard this story for real is because God just put it right in my face. Because we have a culture, we live in a world where, and these are good things and they're tough, like they're bad things. We have boundaries in our world, and they're great boundaries. If your parents lead you to do something, please listen to the wisdom of your parents because Jesus has put them there, and they are a mouthpiece of wisdom from Jesus. And I would even say this to say, if your parents know Jesus, or even if your parents do not, Jesus has still put them there. Listen to the wisdom that comes out of their mouth. Test it by God's wisdom. But so often, even if you don't like it, sometimes especially when you don't like it, it is Jesus' actual wisdom. And so we have boundaries of, hey, I would really like you, Drew. I would really like you, Evelyn. I would really like you, London, not to maybe hang out with this type of person. You ever had that conversation? You know that friend when we were here, and how often do you hang out with them? You ever answered that question? You're like, I see them at school. I see them at gymnastics. They're on my baseball team. Okay, well, and so you have the questions like that, right? And so we get this idea and the healthy boundaries of, okay, spend time with these people and don't spend time with these people. I would absolutely say, as we are part of a Blaze, a middle school Blaze, right, We want this to be a place that's safe, people that you can come and spend time with and run with and celebrate with, and where you are safe and you are given life. But we also have those people, whether we've ever hung out with them or not, that we would go, people that, and you can fill in this blank, people that do this, or people that say they are this, or people that act this way, or people that choose as their lifestyle this, or choose this relationship with this gender or that gender, whatever it may be. We fill in a blank of, no, you don't even mess with those people. And what Jesus is speaking to us right here, and it was brought directly into my face, is, hey, I want to expand your view and understanding of what a neighbor is. Yeah, you might have the greatest neighbor, your next door neighbor, whatever, your neighbor down the street. You might have some of the worst neighbor. I would say this, what we're focused on tonight is, hey, wisdom is serving people. How many times have you thought to serve kind of that neighbor who's the worst? Or do you just close your garage door as fast as you possibly can because oh no, here he comes, all right? All right, and you're like, I feel you. But Jesus says, who is your neighbor? I want to tell you this story. I have a friend named Tom Jones. He genuinely is a friend. He has, to kind of give you that understanding, Tom is aware of, and he's been one of the first people I've shared with when all of our children have been born. Within hours of our children being born, I have sent Tom a picture, and I've said, hey, this is Ezra, this is Shiloh, this is River. I still talk to Tom. I will talk to Tom most likely tonight or even tomorrow night. Tom used to be my boss. I worked at a church in Atlanta, Georgia, and Marietta, Georgia. If you don't know where Marietta is, just say Atlanta. It's almost the same thing. All right. I worked at a church. Tom was my boss. Tom was instrumental. He was a massive piece of my heart for the nations. There came a point where I sat down with Tom, and he knew that God had called me specifically as I work with middle schoolers, but also he called me specifically to the Middle East to carry the name of Jesus and the power of Jesus into the Middle East. And he knew that I couldn't do that on my own, so he sat down and he literally said, every single year, I'm going to give you, and he started with, I'm going to give you $5,000 to go to the Middle East. Go. And so he was one of these people that sat down. He was a great boss. He took care of me. He was there when my dad had cancer, both times, twice. He wasn't just there. He was there when my dad had cancer on Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day, and he showed up on Christmas Day with a full-on Christmas meal, like turkey and everything that we did not ever expect to even have. Came into the hospital room. We had Christmas dinner because of Tom Jones. And one day, Tom Jones, when I come to the office, he's not there. And that was weird because Tom was like there on time and super early before any of us were there, and Tom wasn't there. So it's like, okay, people get sick, right? That's a normal thing. But then the next day, Tom wasn't there. Next day, and eventually we figured out that Tom had disappeared. Like, no one knew where he was. His wife didn't know where he was, and neither one of his daughters knew where he was. We didn't know where Tom Jones was. And so we're on, like Tom means now Tom is missing, and we've got to find Tom Jones. And there's a lot of other pieces to the story, but I think I need to leave it at when we found Tom, he had intentionally disappeared. He had run away as an adult. He had run away because Tom was living a life and had been living a life for at least, I think at that point, 2 years. He still won't admit to living this life to this very day. But he'd living a life that he had, even though he was with his wife and his children, and he would kind of show up and he would be present, he was sharing in and living straight into and actively part of a homosexual life with another man, and he had given his life and experience to this other guy, and that was his life, and so he was running away. I'm still not sure, even though I've talked directly about it, if Tom is aware that I know all of that, even though I've told him directly that he knows all of that, but there's a lot of pieces of he was in shock, all these things. But this happens, right? And I'm like, and I'm about to go on one of these Middle Eastern trips. And so what I had done before is I had asked Tom, hey, would you mind just watching over my house and just making sure everything's okay, because I was usually gone for 3 to 4 weeks to go to wherever it may be. I'm about to go on one of these trips, and I've already got this agreement with Tom, but I'm thinking, well, that's not a thing now because all this has happened. His whole world has blown up by his choice. This is his fault, right? It's his fault. His world's blown up. His wife's filing for divorce, right? His kids, his daughter both of his daughters are angry. He is, just kind of out on his own. And Tom texts me, and I meet with Tom and two other friends, and we sit down, and he says, "Hey, aren't you going to Oman pretty soon?" I was like, "Yeah, but don't worry about that." So we're talking through his life and what has happened, and he says, "You know what? I'll watch your house because I don't have a place to stay. I don't have a house anymore. Can I stay at your house?" And I was like, "This does not feel good. I don't like how this. I don't know what to do here. As you grow up, you'll have these moments. I don't know what to do with this. I don't like to make this decision right in front of you. Can I not say words?" Right? And so eventually I said, "You know what, Tom? Yes." What I didn't know about Tom, he was also a control freak, and he has mad OCD. So best case scenario, he would clean my house top to bottom. He would fix everything that's broken, and I was like, go for it. Tom stays at my house, and I check in with him throughout those 3 weeks just to make sure everything's fine, everything's good. I want you to hear clearly that I love Tom Jones deeply with the love and the power and the honor of Jesus, and I want him to know Jesus. I'm not sure he knows Jesus anymore, and I want him so much to know Jesus, and I want him to see that we love Jesus, and that's why I've shown him all of my kids, because I want him to know that he has a place, that he has people that walk with him as we walk with Jesus if he's willing to come along, which is Jesus loves him too. But when I got back from this trip, I come in, and he texts me as I landed at the airport, and he goes, "Hey, man, I won't be there when you get to the house, but thanks for letting me stay at the house." And he tells me all these things he's taken care of. He goes, "Your neighbor did this, and then I took care of that. I fixed this," and all the things I knew. He's like, "I fixed this. I fixed your broken light upstairs. I fixed your window dressings and all those things that I was a bachelor that I didn't care about." I was like, "Sweet. I never would have done that ever." And I come in. And he's like, "And thanks for letting me stay at your house." And I come into the house, and he goes, I'm just settling in. It is immaculately clean, cleaner than it's ever been when I've lived there. And I was like, "Dude, this place is clean, all right? Nobody can come over again." But anyway, all right. And I come in, and on the bar, or whatever you call that, right by the kitchen, he's left several $100s and a note that just says, "This is for you to do whatever you need to do for whatever." At this point, he's lost all connection to God. So it's kind of like this super vague language of whatever you feel like needs to happen, use this for that. And then I read this story. And Jesus said, "Hey, Drew, who was the neighbor?" And as I, in my mind, stood in that crowd, listened to Jesus tell that story, I said, Tom Jones, who chose all that stuff that genuinely destroys and is destroying his life right now. So he said to me, "Well, there's a lot more to that. Tom thinks he needs to do that to be accepted by God, or whatever his idea is, to be accepted by people, to be a good person, to be kind. But Jesus still says to me and to you, go and do likewise." Because what Tom did is he came from a place of, it was his fault having had nothing. He kind of set his place in this cultural place of being we can't associate, we can't connect, this has made everything so much more complicated. There's destruction happening here. And he's the one that said, hey, here's a little something, and take care of him. And whatever else you got to spend to take care of him, I'll come back and I'll give you more. I want you to hear me very clearly, and I'm not saying go and absolutely full-on embrace the pathway and the lifestyle of every single person that has chosen stuff that genuinely, as Jesus sets out, destroys our lives, because Jesus holds life. But don't miss what the lawyer missed. The one who's telling the story is the neighbor. As Jesus told the story, this man was actively rejecting him. He was like, I'm going to test you. I dare you to get this right, Jesus. How do I get my name in heaven? So he says, I don't know, you answer that question. I love Jesus like, how do you think? And then he tests him again. He goes, okay, love your neighbor. Well, you tell me who my neighbor is. And every single point was a test. Every single point was a challenge. Every single point was a rejection. Every single point was, I'm just waiting for you to get this wrong. When Jesus knew, I'm the one you're rejecting. I know I'm the one that one day you will come to a place and I will literally be beaten half to death in front of the people's eyes. I will literally be hanging on a cross, with every shred of my physical life being poured out of me. And then my life will be given up to, not so you can, lawyer, justify yourself, so that you can be justified. In Proverbs chapter 3, it says this. This is the wisdom God gives. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it's in your power to act. Translation, if you can do something good right now for someone, do it. Do not say to your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I'll give it to you, when you already have it. You ever had that moment? I've had these moments. When I was your age, I was saving up, and I put it in an envelope. I was saving up for a gaming system. I mowed all these lawns, right? I mowed and mowed and mowed and mowed. $20, $30, $40. If you had a big spender, it was $50. I was like, $50. And I'll put it in there, put it in there, put it in there. My neighbor comes to me. He goes, I need $400 right now. And I know in my mind, well, $400 buys me this gaming system. Come back tomorrow, right? And I'll give it to you. All right, it's my gaming system. I worked for that $400. All right, you feel me? He's like, if you got it right now, you know exactly what you're doing when you're saying, come back tomorrow. You're like, so I could buy the gaming system today and tomorrow I won't have it. Do not plot harm against your neighbor if they trust you and they live next door and they trust you. Here's what I want to say, that Jesus is not saying this. He's not saying, hey, go and do more stuff. Make sure you just always do good stuff to do good stuff. Make sure you always take care of people just to take care of people. It's like, no, because what this man was trying to do in the story of the Good Samaritan said he was trying to justify himself. Basically, he was saying, what things can I do to be accepted by you, Jesus, or be accepted by God? And Jesus goes, oh, no. That's not how you are a true and good neighbor. You're a true and good neighbor by living from already being accepted by Jesus. To know that the one that was telling the story would be a neighbor to you, would take your place. He became like us He became like us as a man, so that we could, as he hung on a cross, carried the punishment of our sins, removed sin and defeated death itself. We could become like him as he came back from the dead and was alive again, proving he is God. And he says, Russell, you can become like me if you trust me. You are accepted because my name and my being are on you. Carla, you are accepted by Jesus because my name and my being are on you. And that's how you do good. That's how you serve others. You serve others because you've got the joy to, not because I'm keeping a list of all the great things Russell does. And finally, on thing number 947, he's accepted. No, he's accepted because Jesus finished all of it. Jesus went way out of his way when he is the King of Kings, the creator, the holder of all worlds. In him, all things were created. Through him, all things exist. And he didn't hold that as like, this is my badge. No, he came down into our mud to be like us, to take our place on our cross so that we could have his life and be accepted forever by him. So then we get to go and run and serve. And when we get the Tom Jones lesson, when he leaves the several $100s, we don't sit there and go, oh, now I'm condemned by God. No. We see that and we get the reminder that we can go and do likewise because we got the power of Jesus. Remember the celebration with the 72? No. Go as far as you can because you got power over serpents and scorpions. You got power over all the enemy and nothing is going to hurt you. And it's literally like this little kid moment where Jesus is like, you're not going to believe, like nothing's going to hurt you. I dare you to try to go far enough in serving others. I dare you to try to go far enough in caring for others. I dare you to try to go far enough in showing too much compassion to somebody else. If you see somebody who needs help, act. If you see a neighbor and don't say, say, dude, I got it right now, because you'll be able to notice that moment. To be able, and I know it's a big thing, as 13-year-old Drew is holding his $400, it's a massive thing to be like, I don't know if I can, I don't want it, do you really need this? And he's like, no, I need exactly that. And instead, as I am accepted by Jesus, I can see this moment like, this is Jesus' moment. Of course, here. You see this final question, we're going to go into about 10 minutes of our life groups. And how can you be a true neighbor? And I think of this, and I didn't expect them to be here tonight, but I heard my buddy out there in the door, and I love my little Ezra. And he is rough and tumble, and he is loud, and he is painful, and he is, man, and I love him even more. One thing about children, and it's wild when God introduces us into the kingdom of God, when he shows us what it's like to be a neighbor, he goes, hey, when the children would come to Jesus, he would go, you know how you get your name written in heaven? You come to me and you trust me as a neighbor. You trust me wholly like these children trust me, just like them. And if you can't trust me and follow me like they do, then you won't you won't walk with me. He said, you got to, and I see this a few weeks ago. There's this boy named Beckett in Ezra's class. And I'll give you Ezra because it's this incredible thing we see in little children because Ezra is if you know him, I hope you love him. I love him, so that's all that matters. But he will accidentally hurt you, and then apologize immediately because he knows he shouldn't have done it. Like he'll literally punch you and be like, I'm sorry, that was wrong. I'm sorry, and he'll do this like a little weird. And but he's just so intense all the time. Even when he dances, he's got to slap somebody. It's weird. He's like, yeah. All right. And you're like, why? Why do you have to hit somebody? Like, why? You don't have to hit people, right? But at the same time, a few weeks ago, there was this little boy, and it gave me this picture of what a neighbor looks like. There was a little boy up in one of the classrooms, and the boy was scared to come into the classroom, another 3-year-old, and he was scared, and his mom left him there, and he was super sad, and he was crying, and he kind of went over in the corner, and this is not please, Jesus, this is not a parent brag. This is not something that this is Jesus. And Ezra went over and he said, Daddy, I went, and his teachers told us this as well. We went and I pat him on the head and I said, Beckett, you want to come play with me? And he didn't want to play with him, and so I stayed there.
Ezra has a sweet, sweet, gentle, awesome heart. But mommy and daddy did not do that for Ezra, because we're constantly fighting him not slapping his sister when he's in the middle of dancing, not pushing them off the cart when he just got a new car. They got a car for their birthday, and he pushes them off their own car, right? He's like, and he goes, that is funny. And so when this happens, I'm like, what happened? And Jesus reminded me, hey, go and be that neighbor. Let that remind you who I have been to you and who I am to you. And go do that.